George Soros announces he's going to fight against the dominant ideology of nationalism. The globalist empire is striking back. In a recent interview with Financial Times, billionaire progressive donor George Soros vowed to fight the nationalist idea surging throughout the West. Soros added that nationalism, the world-dominant ideology, is a growing threat to the European Union (EU), the world preeminent globalist project. Soros vows to fight nationalism. Soros lamented the crisis of legitimacy facing the EU in his interview, comparing it to the collapse of the USSR in the late 20th century. Populist challenges flaring in Britain and continental Europe could break up the delicate neoliberal order of the transnational union. It's déjà vu all over again. With one big change, the dominant ideology in the world now is nationalism. It's the EU, that the institution that on the verge of a breakdown, and Russia is now the resurgent power, based on nationalism, Soros said. The USSR once gave way to the liberal West, but the shoe is now on the other foot, says Soros. The West is being undermined by nationalism from the East. Soros blames Russia, which he considers the source of the resurgent nationalism plaguing countries around the globe, for attacks on his progressive charity, the Open Society Foundation (OSF). The OSF was booted from Russia in 2015 for allegedly endangering Russian national security. European populism and the EU nationalism as a practice is far from dominant, but it does seem to be on the up and up, with America First strategies coming from the White House, and similar practices coming from right-wing nations in Central and Eastern Europe, as millions of native Europeans become frustrated with the forced mass influx of migrants. Hungary government is even waging a campaign against Soros and his influence on their politics, because it says he is plotting to undermine the country with open borders and mass migration. Soros, who has supported the resettlement of refugees in Europe since the crisis began in 2015, has called the attacks against him by Viktor Orban government a conspiracy. Much to Soros' dismay, the fallout of the refugee crisis has lifted the sails of populist leaders in Europe and given populism a foothold in places where nobody expected, like Britain, posing a crisis for the EU. Angela Merkel, Europe's leading globalist politician, is struggling to piece together a coalition government in Germany amid the fallout of the refugee crisis. The right-wing populist party Alternative for Germany gained seats in Germany parliament in September. A double-sided man. According to Breitbart, the billionaire donor said he is ready to fight for what is right. But to George Soros, what is right often has more than a little to do with his bank account. The philanthropist described himself as one person who at one time engages in immoral activity and the rest of the time tries to be moral in a 1998 60 Minutes interview. Of course, billionaires have nothing to lose and everything to gain from an open world without borders. Open borders means cheap labor for them. They are insulated from the consequences of mass migration, economic and cultural, that affect millions of ordinary citizens. A battle of ideas. Soros originally planned to shut down the OSF before his death, but the populist wave convinced him to transfer $18 billion of his own wealth to the organization, and he is reportedly planning to stay with the foundation as chairman for at least another 5 years. OSF now has projects in 140 countries all over the world. The foundation, writes Financial Times, once epitomized the optimism about the spread of Western-style democracy in the post-Cold War era, but is now suffering setbacks amidst the wilting popularity of its progressive program. Founded in the latter days of the Cold War, the organization came to be at a time when political theorist Francis Fukuyama famously proclaimed that the end of history was on the horizon. It was then felt that the fall of socialism would usher in a world of open borders and globalized democracy. The populist wave seems to indicate that history is far from over, as the battle of ideas marches on.